Do you want to know what it's like to watch your wife cry alone in the bathroom at 3 a.m. and not be able to comfort her because she doesn't know you're watching? I do. I've watched her break down 47 times in the past 6 months through the camera hidden in our bathroom mirror. I've listened to every therapy session she's had, every phone call with her mother, every conversation she thinks is private. I know things about my wife that she doesn't even know I know. And the worst part? I can't stop watching. My name is David. I'm 36 years old, and for the past year, I've been surveilling my own wife in our own home without her knowledge or consent. There are cameras in every room, audio recorders in places she'd never think to look. I watch her when I'm at work, when I'm traveling, when I'm sitting right next to her on the couch pretending to look at my phone. I know what she does when she thinks she's alone. I know her secrets, her fears, her doubts. I know everything. And she has absolutely no idea. Before you write me off as some kind of monster, let me explain how this started. Because it didn't begin with me being a controlling psychopath. It started with love and fear and a desperate need to understand why my marriage was falling apart. I met Laura 8 years ago at a conference in Seattle. She was presenting on digital marketing strategies. I was there representing my tech startup. She was brilliant and funny and completely out of my league. I asked her to dinner, expecting to be rejected. She said yes. We talked for 5 hours, and I knew by the end of the night that I was going to marry her. We did the long-distance thing for 6 months. She was in Portland, I was in San Francisco. Then I moved my company north, and we got an apartment together. Married a year later. It was one of those relationships that felt effortless in the beginning. We fit together. Same sense of humor, same values, same vision for the future. Our friends called us disgustingly perfect. The first 5 years were exactly that. We built our careers, bought a house in the suburbs, talked about having kids eventually. We traveled together, hosted dinner parties, had inside jokes nobody else understood. I loved her more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Then, something changed. I can't even pinpoint exactly when it started. Maybe 2 years ago? Laura became distant. Not dramatically, she didn't stop loving me or asking about my day or sleeping in our bed. But there was this space between us that hadn't existed before. She'd go quiet in the middle of conversations, seem distracted when I talked, spend hours on her phone, and quickly close apps when I walked by. I asked her multiple times if something was wrong. She always said no, everything was fine, she was just stressed about work. But I could feel her pulling away from me emotionally, and I had no idea why. The sex stopped first. We went from a few times a week to maybe once a month. When we did have sex, she seemed absent, going through the motions. I'd try to talk about it and she'd get defensive, say I was being demanding, that not everything was about sex, which was true, but it wasn't about the sex itself. It was about the intimacy we were losing. Then she started therapy, which should have been a good sign, right? Except she wouldn't tell me what she talked about, said it was private, that she needed something that was just hers. I tried to be supportive. Told her I was glad she was taking care of her mental health, but inside I was panicking because what if she was talking about me, about us, about leaving? I became obsessed with understanding what was happening. I'd check her phone when she was in the shower looking for evidence of an affair or complaints about me to her friends. Found nothing. I'd listen to her side of phone conversations trying to piece together context. Nothing. Obviously, she wasn't cheating, wasn't planning to leave, wasn't doing anything wrong that I could identify, but she was keeping something from me, and it was eating me alive. That's when I installed the first camera. Just one, in our living room. I told myself it was for home security. We'd had a break-in on our street, and it seemed reasonable to have a camera in the main area of the house. Laura didn't question it, thought it was a good idea, actually. But I didn't just use it for security. I started watching the feed during the day when I was at work, seeing what Laura did when she was home alone. And what I saw was nothing concerning, really. She'd work on her laptop, make lunch, talk on the phone with her sister, normal stuff. But I kept watching anyway. Then I installed another camera, in the kitchen, again under the guise of security. Then one in our home office, our bedroom, the bathroom. Each time I justified it as safety, as protection, as making sure our house was secure.
and each time I used it to watch my wife. The audio recorders came next. Small devices hidden in decorative objects, in vents, behind furniture. I could listen to everything she said, every conversation, every moment. I set up the feeds to automatically record and save to a cloud server I controlled. I could review footage and audio from anywhere, anytime. I was watching her constantly. During meetings at work, I'd have her feed up on my second monitor. On business trips, I'd check in throughout the day. At night, while she slept next to me, I'd review what she'd done that day on my phone under the covers. And slowly, I started to understand her in ways I never had before. I learned that she talked to herself while cooking dinner, that she cried sometimes for no reason I could identify, that she'd stand in our closet for 10 minutes some mornings, staring at clothes, overwhelmed by the simple act of getting dressed, that she checked her email compulsively, like she was waiting for something important that never came. I learned her secrets too, things she never told me, like that she'd been taking anxiety medication for 6 months and hiding the pills in a tampon box, that she'd been talking to her ex-boyfriend from college, not romantically, but as friends, and never mentioned it because she knew it would bother me, that she'd been applying for jobs in other cities without telling me she was considering relocating. That last one nearly destroyed me. I watched her on a Zoom interview with a company in Boston, professional and charming, answering questions about why she wanted to move across the country. She never mentioned my name, never mentioned being married. When they asked her about her situation, she said she was flexible, no ties keeping her in Portland. No ties. I was no tie. I confronted her that night, not about the cameras, I couldn't reveal those, but about us, about whether she wanted to leave. She looked genuinely confused, said of course she didn't want to leave. Where was this coming from? I pushed harder. She got angry, said I was being paranoid and controlling, that she needed space to breathe. Space to breathe? From me, her husband. After that fight, she started going to therapy twice a week instead of once, and that's when I made the worst decision of all. I installed a recorder in her car. Her therapy office is 20 minutes away. She'd make calls during the drive. I listened to all of them, heard her talking to her best friend about how suffocated she felt in our marriage, how she loved me but didn't know if she was in love with me anymore, how she felt trapped in a life she'd chosen but wasn't sure she wanted anymore. Then I started listening to her therapy sessions. The recorder I'd hidden in her bag picked up everything. And that's where I learned the truth I'd been so desperate to understand. Laura was depressed, severely, had been for over a year. She didn't know how to tell me because I was always so optimistic, so solution-focused, and she didn't want to burden me with her darkness. She felt guilty for not being happy when our life looked perfect from the outside. She felt like a fraud, like she was failing at being a wife, at being a person.
The therapy sessions were brutal to listen to. She talked about feeling empty, about going through the motions of life without really living. She talked about intrusive thoughts, about wondering what the point of everything was. She talked about me, how much she loved me, but how inadequate she felt as my partner. How she couldn't give me the enthusiastic, joyful wife I deserved. She never talked about the job applications. Those stopped after our fight. The therapist asked about Boston, and Laura said she'd been having fantasies about running away from her life, starting over somewhere nobody knew her. Said she wasn't actually going to do it. It was just escapism. The therapist asked if she'd talk to me about any of this. Laura said no. She couldn't. It would hurt me too much to know she was this unhappy. I was listening to all of this through headphones at my desk at work, and I wanted to scream. She was suffering and protecting me from it at the same time, and I was violating her privacy in the most intimate way possible to understand why she was pulling away. That night, I tried to talk to her, gently. Said I felt like she'd been sad lately. asked if there was anything I could do to help. She gave me a small smile and said she was fine, just tired. I watched her lie to protect me, knowing everything she wasn't saying, and I felt like absolute garbage. But I didn't stop watching. I told myself I needed to monitor her mental health, make sure she was safe, that this was about care, not control, that I was protecting her by knowing when she was at her worst so I could be extra gentle those days. Except it wasn't just about her mental health. I was also watching to see if my suspicions about her pulling away were justified, listening for evidence that she was planning to leave, that there was someone else, that I was losing her. I learned her patterns. I knew that she cried in the shower on Wednesdays after therapy, that she'd sit in the car in our driveway for 10 minutes before coming inside, gathering herself, putting on the face she showed me, that she'd stand in front of the mirror in our bathroom at night, staring at herself, sometimes saying, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay," like a mantra. I saw every version of her. The one she showed me, capable, together, fine. The one she showed her therapist, struggling, lost, scared. The one she showed herself when nobody was watching, exhausted, sad, barely holding on. And I couldn't tell her I knew any of it, because then I'd have to admit what I'd been doing, that I'd violated her privacy so completely that there was no corner of her life I hadn't invaded, that I'd crossed every boundary, broken every trust, all in the name of understanding her better. 6 months ago, things escalated. Laura's depression got worse. She started having crying spells that lasted hours. I'd watch on the cameras as she'd curl up on our couch in the middle of the day, sobbing, while I was in meetings pretending everything was normal. Her therapist increased her medication, recommended intensive outpatient treatment. Laura agreed, but didn't tell me. I found out by listening to the session. I started manufacturing reasons to work from home more, created excuses to check in on her throughout the day. Laura seemed grateful for the attention at first. Then she started to seem smothered. She'd ask why I was suddenly around so much. I'd say my schedule had changed, that I missed her, that I wanted to spend more time together. She started going to her sister's house more, long visits, overnight sometimes. Said she needed girl time, that she and her sister were going through some stuff and needed space to talk. I'd watch her pack her bag through the bedroom camera, see her shoulders relax as she left the house, like she was escaping from me. I installed a tracker on her car, started following her location obsessively. She'd say she was going to her sister's, and I'd watch the dot on my phone to make sure she actually went there. She always did. No cheating, no secret meetings, just exactly what she said she was doing. But the tracker showed me something else. She'd drive around sometimes, aimless routes through the city for hours, just driving. Sometimes she'd park at the waterfront and sit there for 90 minutes, staring at the river. I'd watch her through the dash cam I'd installed, seeing her cry, seeing her just exist in her sadness. And I would want to call her, to drive there, to hold her. But I couldn't without revealing how I knew where she was.
3 months ago, Laura told me she wanted to take a break. Not break up, just some time apart to figure out what she needed. She'd been crying when she said it, apologizing, saying it wasn't about me, that she just needed space to work on herself. I panicked. A break meant her moving out, meant losing my ability to monitor her, to make sure she was safe, to know what she was thinking and planning. I couldn't let that happen. So I talked her out of it, used everything I'd learned from watching her, from listening to her therapy sessions, hit every point her therapist had made about the importance of working through hard times together, about not making major decisions while in the depths of depression. She agreed to stay, said she'd give it more time, but the relief I felt was immediately swallowed by guilt, because I'd manipulated her into staying using information I'd gotten by spying on her. I'd used her own words from therapy, words she'd never shared with me, to convince her to do what I wanted. That's when I realized what I'd become.
Not a concerned husband trying to save his marriage. A controlling, invasive presence in my wife's life who'd normalized violating her privacy to the point that I didn't even hesitate anymore. I tried to stop. I really did. I went 3 days without checking the feeds. 3 days of white-knuckling it, forcing myself not to look, not to listen. But on the 4th day, Laura seemed upset when I got home from work, and I immediately checked the footage to see what had happened. Turns out she'd had a panic attack while making dinner. I watched the recording of her hyperventilating in our kitchen, eventually sitting on the floor against the cabinets, crying and trying to calm herself down. It took her 40 minutes to recover. And when I got home 2 hours later, she was fine. Dinner was ready. She was smiling, asking about my day. Watching her hide that from me broke something in me, because I wanted to be the person she could come to with that. I wanted to be her safe place, but I'd made myself into her warden instead, monitoring her without her knowledge, using information I shouldn't have to manage our relationship. I know I need to tell her. I know every day I don't is another day of violating her consent and autonomy. But how do you confess something like this? How do you tell your wife that you've been watching her in her most private moments for a year? That you know about the pills she's hiding, the job applications she made, the hours she spends crying when she thinks she's alone? How do you admit that you've listened to every therapy session, that you know exactly how unhappy she is, that you've used that information to manipulate her into staying in a marriage she's not sure she wants? Last week, her therapist asked her if she felt safe in our marriage. Laura paused for a long time. Then she said, "I feel safe from him. I don't know if I feel safe with him anymore." That distinction destroyed me. I'm not a threat to her physical safety, but I'm not her emotional sanctuary either. I'm something in between, something she needs space from. This morning, I watched her make a phone call to a divorce attorney. Initial consultation, just exploring options. She told them about our finances, our house, the fact that we don't have kids. She was calm, businesslike. She said she wasn't sure if she was going to file. She just wanted to understand what it would look like. I'm watching the recording now, for the 5th time. My laptop is open at work, the audio file playing through my headphones. My wife's voice, clear and steady, asking about the timeline for dissolution of marriage in Oregon. And I'm finally understanding what I've done. I've been so focused on not losing her that I've destroyed any chance of actually keeping her. Because even if she never finds out about the cameras, even if I confess and somehow she forgives me, I've made it impossible for us to have a real marriage. How can we have trust when I know things about her she never chose to share? How can she be vulnerable with me when I've already stolen every vulnerable moment she tried to keep private? I could erase everything right now, delete the footage, remove the cameras, destroy the evidence of my year-long invasion of her privacy, pretend it never happened and hope she never finds out. Part of me wants to do exactly that, to bury this secret and try to be better going forward. But that would just be another lie, another manipulation, another way of controlling the narrative and protecting myself at her expense. I think I'm gonna tell her tonight. Not because I'm brave, but because I can't carry this anymore. Because she deserves to make choices about her life based on the truth, not on my careful management of information. Because if she's gonna leave me, it should be for the right reasons, not the ones I've hidden from her. I know what's gonna happen. She's gonna be devastated, betrayed, disgusted. She's gonna see every moment we've shared over the past year through a different lens, understanding that I knew more than I should have every time. She's gonna question everything, whether I actually love her or just love controlling her, whether any of our reconciliation attempts were real or just me using her stolen words against her. She's gonna leave. There's no version of this where she doesn't leave, and I'll deserve it. But maybe that's the only way to actually love her at this point, to let her go with the full truth, to give her back the autonomy I've been stealing piece by piece for a year, to face the consequences of what I've done instead of continuing to hide behind manufactured care and concern. I'm looking at my phone right now.
the app that connects to all the cameras. I can see her in our living room working on her laptop, completely unaware that I'm watching. She looks tired, sad, small. I'm going to delete this app after I finish writing this. I'm going to remove every camera, every recorder, every piece of surveillance equipment from our house before she gets home. And then I'm going to tell her everything, not because I think she'll forgive me, not because I think our marriage can survive this, but because the only way to stop being the person who violated her is to face what I've done and accept whatever consequences come. I love my wife. I've always loved my wife. But somewhere along the way, that love became toxic and controlling and abusive, even if I never laid a hand on her. I turned our home into a prison she didn't know she was in. I turned myself into a jailer disguised as a concerned spouse. And the worst part is that I still want to know what happens next. I still want to install just one camera, hide it where she won't find it, so I can see her reaction when I tell her, so I can watch her process this, even after I confess. That impulse is still there. That need to know, to observe, to maintain some level of control, even as I'm supposedly giving it up. That's how deep this sickness goes. Even knowing I need to stop, even planning to confess, even understanding the magnitude of what I've done, part of me is already thinking about how to keep watching, how to maintain access to information she doesn't want to share, how to never be surprised or left in the dark again. But I'm not going to do it. I'm going to delete everything, remove everything, and live with the uncertainty of not knowing what she's thinking or feeling unless she chooses to tell me. I'm going to experience what normal people experience in relationships: trust or the lack of it, genuine connection or honest disconnection. I'm going to stop being a husband who watches his wife cry through a bathroom mirror at 3 a.m. And I'm going to start being the ex-husband who destroyed his marriage through a toxic need for control disguised as love. This is my confession. Not just that I did this, but that I wanted to keep doing it. That I'm writing this now instead of taking down the cameras because I'm procrastinating, giving myself a few more hours of watching before I have to face the truth. That I'm still checking the feed on my phone, even as I type this, monitoring her, unable to let go, even knowing how sick it is. I invaded my wife's privacy in every possible way. I watched her most vulnerable moments. I listened to her most private conversations. I used her own words from therapy to manipulate her. I made her a prisoner in her own home without her knowledge. And tonight, I'm going to tell her. And I'm going to watch her leave, this time with my own eyes instead of through a camera lens, and finally understand what I've lost.